welcome to my demo of the Fortin Evil Pumpkin. This is a very special signature amplifier that was a collaboration between Jason Frankhauser and Fortin Amplification to kind of give the best of Jason's modified Marshalls, along with some of Fortin's special appointments that you find on their other amplifiers, like grind settings, girth settings, some additional gain settings, and so forth. During this demo today, my hope is to give you a different experience within the demos that I've seen for the Fortin Evil Pumpkin. Most of them have been very high gain forward. During this demo, I hope to go through a variety of styles. We're going to do blues, country, some alternative rock, 80s metal, 90s metal, and even some math metal, like you saw in the first clip of the demo today. So let's get started. Before we get started though, I'd like to go through a little bit what my signal path is going to be today, just so you as the viewer understand how this demo is going to work, what I'm using, and so forth. So I'm keeping a very simple setup today. It's going to be guitar straight into a Fortin Zool noise gate, right into the amp. I figured that if you're considering buying this amp, you probably have a variety of pedals that you use yourself, situated in the signal path that you would like to use. So I'm not going to interpret that for you, just as I would make my own signal path on my pedal boards. I want to show you what the amp can do by itself, and this amp can do a whole lot. First on this, there are 3 channels. You have the clean channel, you have what's known as the Killer Cali channel, which is based on Jason's modified Marshall, and then you have channel 3, which is more of Fortin's special sauce, or kind of their EQ. If you're familiar with Fortin devices or some of their pedals, some of their other amps, even their collaborations with Randall, a lot of them have like a girth, grind, and gain setting. So this pretty much, or channel 3 I should say, pretty much takes what is in channel 2 and adds Fortin special sauce to it. Additionally, it does have an effects loop in the back. It's a MIDI controllable device, so I'm using the Fortin Hydra here just to showcase what the pedal looks like and can do. I think it's a really amazing looking MIDI pedal, probably the best I've seen personally that's out there. I'm not going to modify the MIDI settings today for you. This is Jason's amp, so I don't really want to overwrite his settings in that way. But I just wanted to showcase how it's controlled and how you would foot switch this amp if you were to purchase one, whether you use Fortin's pedal or use another MIDI controllable device. The first setting that we're going to go through today are the clean settings. So for the clean setting, I find that the best EQ that worked for me was where your volume is at roughly around between 6 and 7 o'clock. Your bass is more towards this, I would say, the 8 o'clock range on a typical EQ of an amplifier, middle around 8, and then the treble control right around 4 or 5. Depth-wise, I have it between 6 and 7, presence also between 3 and 4, and I'm using the first master volume on this through my aux box. So this whole video demo is going to be recorded through my aux box into Luna. There are no external mics here for it, because I want to not take everyone out of my house with the volumes. But essentially, I'm using the aux box as my input device in that, but the master volume I have set right around 3 to 4 on this amp. It also has a second master volume. What I think is great about that is that if you use the MIDI controllable pedal for the second master volume, you can pretty much have an onboard boost without having to run a separate boost through the front or effects loop of your amp. So that was my favorite part about it. I know that you can also use that to influence probably how hard you push the amp as well, if you really want to do that. I would use it personally as a secondary boost. So with that said, let's get into some clean tones. What you just heard was channel 2 of the Fortin Evil Pumpkin, which is the Killer Cali channel. Wanted to talk to you about my EQ settings a bit before we move on to channel 3. So on channel 2, I have the bass set about 6 to 7, middle set to about 6 or 7, the sweep at about a solid 7, and the treble at a solid 3. I wanted to emphasize the sensitivity of the treble setting of this channel, as I was very surprised about it. It's very sensitive. If you push it above 4 or 5, it really starts to thin out your tone quite a bit, and I tried it with several guitars. I would highly advise keeping it around the 3 to 4 range. If you are using something with a very trebly bridge pickup, you might even want to go lower than 3. Also wanted to speak about the gain, as I've seen other demos on the internet that really push the gain pretty far. My gain settings on this are right about 4 or 5. And I actually adjusted the noise gate a little bit more to accommodate for that much gain. This amp has gain for days. I really don't think you need to go above 4 or 5 gain wise on this. Maybe the only scenario I can think of is if you wanted to do some really emphasized pitch harmonics like Zakk Wylde or something in that kind of style. But I really like the gain at about 4 to 5. I would use pedals to emphasize it further. Now let's move on to channel 3, which is my favorite gain channel of this amp. So that was my demo of channel 3 of the Fortin Evil Pumpkin, which is essentially a modified version of channel 2, the Killer Cali channel. Channel 3 just adds Fortin special appointments to sculpt your tone further, which are the girth, grind, and gain settings. On channel 2, I did not modify any settings whatsoever. They're the same settings that I used in the channel 2 clips. On channel 3, the girth is at about 7, the grind is at about between 5 and 6, and the gain is roughly about 7. In no form of this demo, in channel 2 or channel 3, did I ever push the gain to the levels that the Fortin Evil Pumpkin can go, which are quite astounding gain-wise. I just don't need that much gain for what I personally like, but I do like that it's available, and it's great that the amp has the ability to give the user that level of gain if they want it. What I really like about channel 3 is it reminds me a lot of the bands that I grew up with in the 90s and 2000s. It reminds me of Tool, it reminds me of Deftones, Meshuggah type tones. You can get some really, really nicely defined high gain tones with that, a great amount of mid-range, and a really, really nice raw sounding gain, which I think is one of Fortin's best qualities across all of their products. It's got kind of a gain dryness that you don't hear amongst a lot of other amp manufacturers. And it's probably why they're so desirable. Before I leave you today, I thought I'd give you some final thoughts about the Fortin Evil Pumpkin. I really enjoyed playing this amp and thought it had an incredible amount of versatility given that it's very high gain forward. This is a signature amplifier of a high gain artist, and it's made by Fortin, which is known for catering to high gain and metal enthusiasts. With that said, we did explore how the clean channel could be very usable, playing some alternative, some country, some of those tones that you typically would not see or be able to perform with a high gain amplifier. You can do with the Fortin Evil Pumpkin if you would like to do it. I think for the high gain or metal enthusiasts that's looking to express themselves creatively with some clean tone sections, I think it would sound amazing with some reverb, with some delays, some of those more ambient textures. You could do that really well with the clean tone of the Fortin Evil Pumpkin, while also having absolutely crushing tones for your channel 2 and channel 3 sections of the amp that you wouldn't typically get with an amp that can do really good cleans. So I think it's a really great amp out there for somebody looking for the Evil Pumpkin. I congratulate the new owner, whoever picks this up from Jason. Lastly, just wanted to say thank you to Jason at Goldfinger Guitars for offering me the opportunity to borrow and play the amp. This is a very rare amp that sold out almost instantly once it was released by Fortin. It was highly anticipated, and I think it was up maybe about 2 hours before it sold out completely at a pretty high price when it was released. So I feel very grateful to have the opportunity to play it and see. Most people won't even see one in person, but to have one in my gear room that I could play with, experiment with, and so forth is a really nice opportunity. So thank you, Jason at Goldfinger Guitars. Again, he is selling this amp, so if you are looking to buy it, I will include the link in the description below. And if it's on Reverb, or if you reach out to Jason and he still owns it at the time of the video, it's still available. So again, thank you, Jason, and thanks for watching and listening.